Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakio. Thanks for joining me for Dharma Sunday, where we take canonical Buddhist teachings and tie them with daily life. The title of today's talk is Ravi Zacharias Doesn't Understand Buddhism. Before I begin to that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. And one more thing before we begin today's discussion. I'd like to apologize for not posting this week's meditation and sutra study on Wednesday like I normally do. My laptop died, unfortunately, and I had to wait to get a new one before I could start recording talks again. So, one, apologies for the inconvenience, but also I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, please follow me either on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. That way, if I have issues in the future, you will be notified. So, Ravi Zacharias was a Christian apologist, meaning that he made his bread and butter by traveling the world and explaining to people why Christianity was correct and other religions like Buddhism is incorrect. And I think this is wonderful. I believe strongly that religious argument can be healthy in the same way that hiking or playing sports can be healthy in terms of building up our physical body. Religious argument helps us build up our spiritual body. More than that, I believe strongly that if we are going to hold on to beliefs, we need to be able to explain those beliefs coherently. So I welcome apologists like Ravi Zacharias. I think what they're doing is terrific because they push us to truly understand the Buddhist faith and why we do the things that we do. Now, that being said, I am going to post a link to the original video in the description for this talk. However, please don't go over there and leave any nasty comments. Again, it's very good that people are asking these questions, and as Buddhists, we should be encouraging them to do so. I'm doing this talk simply in good faith to answer some questions and change some misconceptions that Ravi presented in his talk. So what did he say exactly? Well, Ravi, in his talk, made several points, the first of which being that nirvana is the absence of desire and that His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, is failing in his spiritual journey because he desires the liberation of Tibet. Now, this is incorrect for a couple of reasons. First, I believe Ravi has a misunderstanding of the Four Noble Truths, which state life is suffering, suffering is caused by desire, the way to end desire, or the way to end suffering is to end desire, the way to end desire is the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, it should be noted, however, that when Buddha states that suffering is caused by desire, he's not telling us that desire is bad. He's simply reminding us that desires have consequences, and that we need to look at those consequences carefully before we feed into any one of our desires. So, for example, as human beings, if we get hungry, we have a desire to eat. Perfectly natural, perfectly normal. However, what we eat potentially causes suffering. If we choose to eat a cow, pig, chicken, etc., then obviously they're not going to like it, which is why in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, we're encouraged to be either vegan or vegetarian. But even then, we haven't totally eliminated suffering because insects are killed and earthworms are killed in the harvesting of our vegetable crops, which goes back to the first noble truth, which states that life is suffering. So in the Four Noble Truths, Buddha is simply stating that desires have consequences, and suffering is a natural part of life. Now, to alleviate some of that suffering, we need to examine our desires carefully, pick them apart, figure out which ones are not worth the suffering they'll cause, which ones are unavoidable, so we need to work with them skillfully, like the desire to eat or the desire for medicine, clothing, or shelter, and which desires are actually very healthy and we should embrace them wholeheartedly. Beyond that, the definition of nirvana as the absence of desire is also incorrect. The Nirvana Sutra tells us that nirvana is the extinguishment of the defilements of greed, anger, and ignorance. In fact, Buddha uses the analogy of a lamp. So we extinguish the flames of the defilements and we're simply left with the lamp itself. Now, greed, anger, and ignorance are the three poisons. All of the suffering in our world can be tracked back to one of or a combination of those three things. Either we're greedy, we want things we don't have, we're angry, we're trying to get rid of things we do have, or we're ignorant, meaning we're so addicted to our sense pleasures, chasing after wealth, fame, money, etc., that we can't see the consequences of our actions clearly. Nirvana, also known as inner peace, comes when we extinguish those defilements. And when we do that, we're left with the lamp of our Buddha nature. Now, it should be noted, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, that our Buddha nature doesn't exist solely within us. Rather, it's part of the larger Buddha body known as the Dharmakaya. And as we know from our own human bodies, that if we realize something is part of ourselves, we very naturally and intuitively take care of it. Not out of a sense of desire necessarily, but simply because it seems like the right thing to do. So for example, if I'm walking outside and my hands are cold, I don't desire for them to be warm. I don't ask myself, are they good hands? Do they deserve to be taken care of? I intuitively and reflexively put them in my pocket because I understand my hands are a part of myself. If we understand this completely, if we realize nirvana, we understand that all sentient beings are also part of ourself. Therefore, we naturally and intuitively care for them. So when His Holiness the Dalai Lama is working for the liberation of Tibet, he's not necessarily doing that out of a sense of desire. As an enlightened being, he's doing that simply because he understands that his own happiness and enlightenment is tied to the happiness and enlightenment of his people and the alleviation of their suffering. He also understands that the Chinese government, which annexed Tibet and forced the Dalai Lama and his people to live in exile, is also a part of his Buddha body, which is why whenever His Holiness speaks about the Chinese government, he always calls them his friends. So that's Ravi's first point. The second point, if I can find it here, is twofold. He's talking about reincarnation and rebirth. And he says first that if we've lived multiple births in the past, that there has to be a finite number. Meaning there has to have been a first birth that caused all the other ones to take place. And then he then asks the questions, well, what's the purpose of that birth? What were we being punished for? So he's stating that rebirth is a form of punishment, and he's also stating that there have been a finite number of rebirths going back into the past. And this is wrong for two reasons. One, in Buddhist cosmology, we are taught that the universe has always been here. And the reason is very simple. You can't get something from nothing. I'll say it again. You can't get something from nothing. So the fact that something is here means that something has always been here. Now, you could say that this something was created by something else, but that doesn't quite work because then that something else would have needed to have been created. And then you go back and back and back, it becomes an infinite egress. So the universe has been here, the universe will always be here, etc. Now, what this means is that we've all lived an infinite number of rebirths. So there is no finite number. Just like the universe is infinite, our rebirths are also infinite. And this is actually a beautiful teaching because if I understand that in my past lives, I have been a man, I have been a woman, I have been an animal, I have been a hungry ghost, I have been rich, I've been poor, I've been in between. then I naturally have a feeling of compassion for people who are living those experiences in this life, because I know I have been where they are. So, for example, if I'm walking down the street and I see a homeless person rather, begging for change, if I think that this life is the only life and I've just made all the right decisions and I've never been in that person's shoes, then I might just keep walking because, why not? But if I understand that in a previous life, I was that person on the street with no place to go, asking for some change just to get a cup of coffee, if I understand that, then empathy naturally comes about. Again, that understanding that we are all part of the same Buddha body. And then maybe I share a smile with them, a kind word. If I have some loose change, I might give that to them as well. So, this teaching of rebirth, we have to understand this. This also comes back, he doesn't say this specifically, but it seems like Ravi has a misunderstanding of karma. This idea that if we're reborn, it's because we have negative karma that we have to pay for. And this is incorrect. Karma is not punishment and reward, it's simply cause and effect. Meaning that if there is a candle, let's say, and I stick my hand over the candle flame and I get burned, the candle isn't punishing me. That's just what happens when you stick your hand into a fire. So understanding karma is not us trying to avoid punishment or get a reward. It's simply us understanding the cause and effect of our universe, seeing and comprehending intuitively how things operate in the world. Now, finally, he states a few things. He asks, if there is no God, where does our essence come from? And without a God, he's referring to the Christian God in this respect. How can we have any directives or moral reasoning in terms of how we can live our lives? Now, in Buddhism, we don't believe in a permanent essence per se. We don't believe in a permanent, separately abiding self. All things are part of the Buddha body. In fact, it is the illusion of a separate self which causes suffering because it creates attachment to the 5 aggregates. It also creates attachment to the sense pleasures, which I alluded to earlier. That said, we do believe that all beings, as I've stated repeatedly, are manifestations of the Dharmakaya, that we come here as a result of karmic seeds that were planted in the Dharmakaya, also known as the storehouse consciousness, in the past, that ripened when time and conditions were correct. So I exist because in the past, my parents came together, cause and effect took place, and I was conceived as a result. And we can go back and back and back. So there is no permanent, separately abiding essence. However, if we want to really push this issue, we in Buddhism believe that our essence, our core, if you will, is Buddha. In the Nirvana Sutra, it's stated that all beings possess Buddha nature, that Buddha nature is covered over with by defilements, greed, anger, and ignorance, and that enlightenment is the removal of those defilements so that our Buddha nature can come forth. And we do this through various expedient means, keeping the precepts, studying sutras, bowing, chanting, meditation, etc. So if you really want to know what is the essence of an individual, well, it's the essence of all living things. Our essence is Buddha. What is Buddha? Well, we are told by Reverend Manshi Kiyozawa, a Pure Land Buddhist minister, that Buddha is infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, and infinite capacity. So in Buddhism, we are taught that all people are basically good because all people possess at their core infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, and infinite capacity. Now, this also answers the question, without God, how can we have directives or moral reasoning with which we can live our lives? Now, I first want to address this issue of God. So in Buddhism, we do not believe in a creator deity. In fact, the Pratipana Samadhi Sutra states numerous times that there is no creator. And the reason for this is what I discussed earlier. If there is a creator that created the universe, then we have to ask who created the creator and who created that creator, on and on and on, an infinite egress. The universe exists because the universe has always existed in some way, shape, or form. That being said, there are gods liturgy in Buddhism. There's the Brahma gods, the Indra gods, the heavenly kings, there are angels, there are devils. Buddhist cosmology is a whole thing. Now, that being said, we don't worship any of these beings because they suffer from the same defilements that we do. They suffer from greed, they suffer from anger, they suffer from ignorance. In fact, some of the sutras tell stories of Buddha going to places like the hell realms or Tushita heaven, etc., and giving Dharma teachings to the gods, to the demons, so that they can eventually realize enlightenment, just like he did. Out of his infinite compassion, he does this. Now, that said, we as human beings don't pay much attention to the gods because they're not that important. It's kind of like ants compared to human beings. We're much more powerful than them. We can crush them in an instant, but ants don't spend their days worrying what people are doing. They're busy in their anthills doing their thing. It's the same for us as human beings, as Buddhist practitioners. We acknowledge the existence of gods. However, we understand that they are not what's necessary for our own enlightenment. So we kind of just do our own thing. More than that, if you look at the example of some of the gods in the Greek or Egyptian pantheon, for example, they don't set very good examples to follow. Zeus was given over to lust amongst other things, all of his illegitimate children. Why would we want to be like that? If we look at what happened between Osiris and his brother Seth, again, they don't seem like individuals we want to emulate. Now, speaking specifically of the Christian God, I'm reminded of the story of Job, who was a moral, upstanding man, a good servant of the Lord, and God decided to test him by allowing a number of calamities to befall him. And Job remained faithful through them all, even when his own wife told him that he should curse God and die. Job did not. However, after he was restored, he was a little upset and he cried out to God, asking for justice, asking, "Why did you allow this to happen to me?" And in the book of Job, chapter 38, God responds. He calls out from the whirlwind and basically says, "Who are you to question me? Did you create the heavens and the earth? Do you know the Levanthian that swims through the water? Do you understand the measurements of the earth? Create your own universe, and then you can ask me why I do what I do." And that's fine from the Christian perspective, but from the Buddhist perspective, we ask questions of everyone. And if we don't get answers, we keep asking questions, not because we're good or important or anything like that, but because we understand we are defiled beings, that we have suffering, greed, anger, and ignorance we have to work through. And it's through asking questions that we get the answers we need in order to realize enlightenment. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this talk, is because I want to answer questions. I encourage you to keep asking questions of everyone. Ask questions of your teacher. Ask questions of the gods if you believe in them. Ask questions and keep asking them until you get answers. Amitabha. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. I'll just end with a few announcements. So this was Dharma Sunday. We do this every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I just take some topic from pop culture or the news and I speak on it from a Buddhist perspective. On Wednesdays, we do meditation and sutra study, which is a bit more involved. That involves a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from Buddhist scripture, followed by a Dharma talk. So, I hope to see you then. Until next time, Amitabha.